On the night of February 1st, 1959, 9 experienced hikers pitched their tent on a remote Soviet mountainside. By morning, they were all dead. But here is what no one could explain. The tent had been cut open from the inside. The hikers were found scattered across the snow, barefoot in temperatures of -30 degrees Celsius. Some had run more than a kilometer from the tent into the darkness. One had a fractured skull. Another had missing eyes. A third had no tongue, no predator tracks, no avalanche debris, no signs of any other human presence. The Soviet government classified the investigation files for 30 years. What were 9 trained, experienced mountaineers so afraid of that they tore through their own tent and ran to their deaths in the dark? That is what we are here to find out. Welcome. Today we are going deep into one of the most disturbing and genuinely unexplained events of the 20th century, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. We are going to walk through exactly what happened, what investigators found, and the theories that have emerged in the decades since, including one that the Russian government quietly acknowledged just a few years ago. By the end of this video, you will understand why this case has haunted scientists, investigators, and conspiracy researchers for over 60 years, and why it is still not solved. Let's start from the beginning. January 1959. The Soviet Union. A group of 10 students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute set out on an ambitious winter expedition through the northern Ural Mountains. Their goal was to reach a peak called Otorten, a grade 3 difficulty hike, the highest rating for Soviet winter expeditions at the time. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, an experienced hiker and engineer who had planned the route himself. The others ranged in age from 20 to 38. These were not amateurs. Most had years of hiking and survival experience. One member, Semyon Zolotaryov, was a decorated World War II veteran. One member of the group, Yuri Yudin, fell ill early in the journey and turned back. He would be the only one to survive. He would spend the rest of his life wishing he knew what happened to his friends. On January 28th, the group made camp near a small settlement and set off into the wilderness. The last people to see them alive were local Mansi tribespeople, who warned them that the mountain they were heading toward had a name in their language. The Mountain of the Dead. The group pressed on anyway. On the night of February 1st, they set up camp on the exposed slope of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl, which translated from the local Mansi language means Dead Mountain. It was the last camp they would ever make. When the group failed to return on schedule, a search party was sent out on February 26th. What they found on the mountainside would baffle investigators for generations. The tent was there, partially collapsed and buried under snow. But it had been sliced open from the inside, not unzipped. Someone had used a knife to cut an exit from within. The hikers' belongings were still inside. Food, shoes, warm coats, everything. Footprints led away from the tent, barefoot or in socks, heading down the slope toward the tree line about a kilometer away. The prints were calm, measured, not the tracks of people in a full panic. They were walking. Then the prints simply stopped. At the tree line, searchers found 2 of the hikers, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, dead, frozen, wearing only their underwear, beside the remains of a small fire. Branches had been broken from the tree above, up to 5 meters high, as if someone had been desperately climbing to see something in the distance. 3 more bodies were found shortly after, between the tree line and the tent, including Igor Dyatlov himself, lying face up in the snow, his hand raised, frozen in place. All 5 appeared to have died of hypothermia. Puzzling, but explainable. What was not explainable came 2 months later, when snow melted and the final 4 bodies were found in a ravine. These were different. The final 4 victims were found in a creek bed beneath 4 meters of snow. The medical examiner's report on these 4 changed everything. Nikolai Thibault Brignolel had a major skull fracture, the kind caused by extreme blunt force, not a fall. Investigators noted it was comparable to the force of a car crash. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov Both had multiple fractured ribs on both sides of the chest, again consistent with massive crushing force. The pathologist noted that such injuries in living humans would require an extraordinary external force, but there were no external wounds, no bruising on the skin, no signs of a fight. Crushing internal injuries, with the exterior of the body completely intact. And then there was Lyudmila Dubinina. Her tongue, eyes, and parts of her lips were missing. Her eyes had been removed. The pathologist's report described it clinically. But search party members who found her later said they never forgot the sight. The Soviet investigation ruled the cause of death. An unknown compelling force. And then they buried the files. One more detail. Journalists and researchers who later examined the hiker's clothing found that several items contained traces of radioactive contamination, specifically on Zolotaryov's clothing, at levels described as medium to high. No explanation was ever given for this. 9 people, crushed bones, radioactivity, missing organs, an unknown force. What happened on that mountain? Let's go through the most credible theories, and the one that might actually be the answer. For decades, the most official explanation has been an avalanche. In 2019, the Russian government reopened the case and ultimately settled on this. A small, delayed avalanche struck the tent while the hikers slept, panicking them into cutting their way out and fleeing in terror. It sounds reasonable, but investigators at the time noted there was no avalanche debris. The slope was not steep enough to produce one, and the footprints leading away were calm and ordered, not the chaotic marks of people buried and digging out. The avalanche theory also does not explain the radioactive contamination, the missing organs, or the type of crushing injuries on the bodies. Most researchers consider it insufficient. The Ural Mountains region in 1959 was a known corridor for Soviet military operations. Several witnesses in the area reported seeing orange orbs in the sky on the same night. Could a secret military test, perhaps a pressure mine, a parachute mine, or an experimental weapon, have detonated near the camp? Such weapons could produce massive internal injuries without marking the skin, and could explain the radioactive traces. This theory is credible and uncomfortable, because if true, it means the Soviet government knew exactly what happened, classified it, and let 9 families grieve in silence for decades. One of the more scientifically grounded theories involves infrasound, sound waves at frequencies too low for humans to hear, but which can be produced by strong wind passing over specific mountain terrain. Infrasound at certain frequencies causes extreme psychological distress, panic, terror, paranoia, and hallucinations. It has been documented to make people flee from their location without understanding why. If the mountain's geography produced an infrasound event on the night of February 1st, it could explain why 9 rational, experienced hikers cut their tent open and ran into the dark in the dead of winter. It doesn't explain the physical injuries, but it explains the flight. Yuri Yudin, the only survivor, the man who turned back, spent decades trying to get the Soviet files released. When some were finally declassified, he reviewed the photographs and personal effects. He identified Zolotaryov's camera, recovered from the scene. When the film was developed, the final frames were heavily exposed, as if the camera had been triggered repeatedly by a bright, sudden light. 9 people went up that mountain, trained, experienced, and prepared for anything nature could throw at them. Something, and we still do not know what, drove them out of their tent in the middle of the night, coatless and shoeless, into temperatures that should have immediately sent them back. Whatever they encountered was more frightening than the cold. The mountain is still there. The pass was named after Igor Dyatlov in 1963, a memorial to the group that never came home. Every year, hikers still climb it. The Soviet case file lists the cause of death as an unknown compelling force, and 65 years later, that is still the best answer anyone has. If this case gripped you, subscribe Every week we go deep into the world's most disturbing unsolved events, one case at a time. The next one is already being researched. You will not want to miss it.